When you're fed up with fighting food and your body, join us here. I'm Ali Shapiro, creator of the Truce with Food program and your host for Insatiable, where we explore the hidden aspects of fighting our food, our weight, and our bodies, and dive deep into nutrition science and true whole health. Fair warning, this is not your parents' health care. This is a big rebel yell to those who crave meaning, hunger for truth, and whose lust for life is truly insatiable. Believe me, freedom awaits. Welcome to Season 3, Episode 4, Burnout on Insatiable Podcast. Today, everybody, we have a very special guest. I'm not going to tell you who it is. I'm going to try to keep the tension for all of 2 more minutes. My grandma was always really bad at keeping surprises, and I think I inherited that from her, if that is possible to be a genetic thing. So today, me and my very special guest, we're going to talk about the mental side of burnout. There is obviously a physical component to burnout, and we've done episodes on adrenal fatigue, your gut health, your hormones, all that stuff. But today we're going to look at how we burn our own selves out mentally. And me and my special guest are going to talk about our own personal experiences with burnout. Not going to lie, I felt a little bit of a vulnerability hangover after I shared some of this stuff because I didn't want it to be taken out of context and felt like I need to explain more, but you can just listen to it yourself and hopefully my intentions were communicated. We're also going to talk about what I call compare and despair that often fuels burnout and us being so busy and feeling like we can never get ahead. And lastly, we're going to share some ideas for how to stop feeling like life is just happening to you and that you can't keep up. I hear the words overwhelm more than I ever have in my entire practice of 11 years. So how can we get out of that pattern so that we don't burn out and we can prevent it or we can recover from that current burnout we're feeling? We'll talk about that today. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. Oh my God, Insatiable listeners, we have one of our favorite guests ever on the show today. Before I get to the big reveal, hint, it's Juliet.
Hello, everybody. I'm back.
It's so good. I've missed you. We got to catch up. We got to tell everyone where you've been, getting married and all that fun stuff. But before we get there, just a reminder, everyone, I have a brand new website. And why that matters to you is there is an awesome quiz. Juliet took it. She's going to share with us what she learned, or at least if she liked it or not, on the website called What's Your Comfort Eating Style? And it is basically telling you what your eating habits say about you. And Juliet and I are going to talk about burnout today. And a lot of what we're going to talk about are based on these patterns that you can figure out on the quiz. So go to alishapiro.com and on the homepage, you can take the quiz. So definitely check that out. So Juliet, welcome back.
Thank you.
What have you been up to?
Very happy to be here.
Besides your beautiful wedding, I went. It was gorgeous.
Yes, Ali and Carlos were there. It was amazing. We got married in September in Woodstock, New York, and it was very fairy tale. We had the most sunny, gorgeous day. And apparently every wedding there that whole year, they said had rain except for ours.
No way.
Yeah, they said every single Saturday was some sort of rain from January and then up until our wedding was September 9th, and we had nothing. As you remember, it was just like the most beautiful, not too hot, not too cold.
It was gorgeous. And everyone, I survived a hike, this epic hike with Juliet and all of her trainer friends and most of Unite. I made it.
You did awesome. And Mackie's dad made it, and he's 71, and he was like leading the pack. It was crazy.
It was. And I was like, oh my God. It was so, I was like, please let me survive. And I did. And
yes, of course, the morning of my wedding, guys, I make everyone go on like a crazy epic hike, which I couldn't even finish and was super upset. And everybody was yelling at me and mad at me because they were like, you have hair and makeup starting in 30 minutes. And I'm like, but I have to get to the top. And they're like, I think this is more important. You're getting married. So I had to turn around and let everybody else finish. It was really upsetting. So I could go meet the hair and makeup person.
It was awesome though. How has newlywed, I mean, I know you guys have already lived together, but did it shift anything for you guys?
Yeah, I mean, not in the sense of like our current situation as far as like living together, because we've been together. We just had our 7-year like dating anniversary this past March. But I think just feeling more secure and stable because he is now my family. And there's something really powerful about that. And I did notice a shift in myself, just feeling really more empowered, actually. Like I've got this rock of a person, he's not going anywhere. And there's just something really powerful about that. Not in a codependent way, because I always have to remind myself of that, because I second guess myself sometimes when I think about how much I love him and want and depend on him, because I still want to have my independence and never feel like if he, if we weren't, together, would I be able to like hack it? And yes, of course I would. In fact, but having him here being my husband is actually just makes me stronger and is making me grow exponentially as a person in a really strange way, just having, like I said, that rock, that person that will be there for you no matter what.
Yeah, well, and I think you and Mackie have a very similar relationship to Carlos and I, in that it's not codependent in that like, oh, Mackie's going to rescue you. It's that he's going to be there as like a sounding board, as someone who can support you through the ups and downs and really encourage you and let you see how powerful you are yourself, right? Versus having to depend on him for other things. And interdependence is healthy, right? Like that's that's like that tricky nuance of like being able to like depend on someone and open up is really brave. And it's like I'm opening my heart up, even though, who knows what could happen, not just like a divorce, but loss and all that stuff. So there's that nuanced territory.
Yeah. And I think coming from a childhood of a lot of traumatic experiences and having a mentally ill mother, and I think that there is something super powerful for everybody when it comes to having someone in your life who gives you unconditional love.
Mm-hmm.
I think that if you have that unconditional love, you can really accomplish anything. I know it sounds sort of like esoteric and like, what do you mean anything? But it's like you just feel more secure in life when you have that.
Yeah, it's almost like I always think of it as like a playground. Like life is this big, dangerous playground. But if you know that you can go back to someone who's like, I'm going to wipe your knee.
Exactly. It doesn't matter what you do, what you say, what failures, what accomplishments. I'm here to love you. And there's no strings attached to that love. It's not a selfish love.
Yeah, yeah. And I also think ritual is really important. I think that's something that the wedding process can be really powerful of, if you take rituals are just so important. I think that's one of the things that as we've become less religious of a society, church and religion offers a lot of ritual that reminds us of these thresholds that we're passing and the intentions. And I think that's one of the best things that we could probably bring back into our everyday society. I'm not a huge fan of organized religion, but I like the sense of community and ritual and mindfulness that often take place in various, and you can do rituals outside, right?
Yeah. Well, I think, just in even shifting, the conversation a little bit of kind of like what I've been up to is just working on my business, Unite, and creating more of an experience with it, because people aren't going places now to just buy things. They're not just buying a gym membership. They're not just buying a training session. They're not just, buying a nutrition program. What people need more than anything now, because of the disconnect with technology and social media, is they need experiences. And so people are spending their money on having an experience. And so what I've been working on with Unite is creating a more impactful experience for people when it comes to their workout and just our delivery of it. And we've always had a really great experience, I think, but it's just even refining it and fine tuning it even more now. So that's what I've been up to. And it's still working on expansion with our company. We just graduated. We just feels like a graduation. Believe me, we just got through year 1 of the second studio that we had opened. So that's a huge accomplishment, and it's going really well. We have 2 studios in Center City, Philadelphia, and now it's just talking about, continuous growth, whatever that looks like for us. I was talking to Allie, to be honest, this shit is hard. It's really not easy. So we're in this place right now with my business where it's like figuring out Are we happy with where we are and just continuing to have these 2 studios and grow them? Or can we go further? Is it worth it? Is it worth the grind? Is it worth the burnout, as we're going to talk about today? So yeah, so that's where I am. It's hard and rewarding, I guess, all at the same time.
Yeah. Right. Depends on how you look at it, which is something we'll get into today. So yeah. So let's talk a little bit about burnout, and what we want to share with you guys today is kind of our own experiences. And, kind of in the old school fashion of Insatiable, we're not saying that we're experts. We don't have a PhD in adrenal fatigue or whatever, but I think we've learned some really valuable things in our own experiences with burnout. So we're going to share with it for you today. So Juliet, for starters, when did you most recently find yourself in burnout, and how do you define burning out?
Yeah, I mean, very loaded question, Allie. I would say that I'm the type of person that says, oh, I'm so burnt out, like every other week. It's not even like, a quarterly thing or like every 6 months. It's just the nature of my job is it's an extreme grind. Being in the fitness industry is not a 9 to 5 by any means. It's up at 5 and home by 9. And, in the day, yeah, you're going to have breaks. Oftentimes I'll be able to go home from 12 to 2 to take a quick cat nap or emails and sort of de-stress from whatever classes I was teaching or whatever training I was given. But at the end of the day, I'm on from that 5 a.m. till sometimes that 9 p.m. or even 11 p.m. because, I get into a bad habit of when I get home that late, I don't just go to bed. I watch television, I unwind. It's interesting because sometimes and I'm sure a lot of us find ourselves in this where we're not really even unwinding. We're sort of we're winding up again. Like we are stimulating ourselves with the endless scroll of social media or watching Real Housewives, something toxic on television. And so for those 2 hours that you have, you're not really using them positively. And then I wonder why I lay in bed and my heart is beating out of my chest. And I feel like, I just took caffeine pill before I'm trying to go to sleep.
So are you saying that the life of a trainer is not what the Instagram feed looks like? There's a lot of grind behind the jumping up of some of these. I see some of these fitness people, they're like, woohoo, they're like clicking their heels up. And I'm like, that's not what running a business feels like for me.
Yeah, I have to be honest with you. Like, I feel like the fitness industry often is super disgenuine and it really bothers me. And I'm going to cop to my Instagram sometimes not even being the most genuine as it could be, as far as pictures I post of my, me with my sports bra on, being like, I'm honest when I'm saying like I'm having a great day today and whatever. But it's, you're a brand. So you're looking to get people to follow you. And so you have to be on brand. And so that's posting positive pictures of yourself with your abs and, your toned booty or whatever it is, and there's so much of that in our industry that's just, it's not even genuine. It's just what you have to do. And we all know that, like, all right, did you post your video today? Did you post a picture today? Did you hashtag it properly? It's a business.
Yeah, I think that's important for people to realize too in terms of burnout, because I think I just did an interview with, you remember Katie Hess from Flower Essences? Yeah, I just went on her podcast and we were talking about overwhelm and stress. And after the episode ended, she's like, after talking, I really feel like the digital world is contributing to burnout. Like it's this feeling of like, how do I keep up? Am I ahead or am I behind? Because you like go on and you compare and despair. Like I just came up with that, like as when I was chatting with her, I'm like, it's compare and despair.
I love that. It's so true, especially in my industry.
Yeah. Well, and what happens, or like if you want to be in a different industry and you follow these people out of like quote unquote inspiration, when you're feeling down and really like it's the same data, but when you're feeling down and exhausted and you're like, how are people accomplishing all this? Or they're so successful and I'm not. And I'm like sitting here scrolling in my, dirty pajamas. Like,
I know. I'm like, how do all these women, they have full face makeup on and their sports bra and they're, they have just the right amount of sheen on their, on their body as far as how much they sweat. And, if I were to take video or picture of me, like in my real workout, it's not a pretty sight. But no, it is compare and despair for sure. And it contributes a lot to your exhaustion and burnout when you're doing that, and I call it the endless scroll, because there's something really powerful and brainwashing about just scrolling through social media, and it becomes a way of numbing yourself. However, then it causes more pain. Like you're numbing, but then you end up feeling like you're in more pain afterwards because you have all of these thoughts of comparison that you didn't have beforehand. And, I know this to be true because I recently started, you can do this thing on Instagram where you mute someone. If you don't necessarily have to like unfriend them, but you can mute them so that you don't see their posts anymore. And then all of a sudden I'm like, I'm a little less stressed now. I don't see that particular person's stuff all the time. And it's because it is that powerful.
Oh, and it's designed that way. Like I have not been reading all of the articles that have come out about how Facebook basically sold all of our data.
Oh, geez, yeah.
But a lot of these tech people are saying like, we aren't letting our own children on this stuff because it's designed to keep you in an emotional state that will keep you scrolling. Like some of the stuff that Cambridge Analytica did during the election is like CIA level brainwashing. Like that's what they said. And that's what's happening to us on a different degree. It's a continuum, right? It's like keeping us in this state of fear or anger or comparison. And so then it's really like psychological warfare. Like, I mean, I don't want to get too dramatic, but it can hook us into that.
Yeah. But like getting back to it, like at the end of the day, when you are looking at Instagram and you are looking at, let's say someone in my field who is a trainer, it's a business. What they're posting, those professional photos that are taken, with a beautiful background and the perfect outfit and makeup, that it's because it's marketing. That's the marketing material right there. So you can't really take it at face value to think that this person's life is so perfect.
Yeah, that's for sure. One of the things that you were describing, and this is kind of how I describe burnout, is when you're like, I feel like I'm burnt out after 2 weeks or continuously, is this idea of depletion, right? I think that's when someone's like really burnt out. You can have a week where you're like, oh, that week kicked my ass, right? But when you keep almost coming back to the sense of like, I can't feel like I can get my energy back, or I feel spacey, or like, I don't have the same oomph I used to have, I think that to me is like this chronic sense of depletion. It's like, even if I eat well, even if I got a good night's sleep, there's something happening that I just can't seem to get my battery level up to, like, how when your phone like gets older, like I have a 3.5, and it's like you charge it, but then it like goes dead right away.
Yeah, exactly. Like you might have a good day at work. You might have some uplifting meeting. You might have a great conversation, with friends. But then the next day, you wake up and you're right back to where you were the morning before. So you have to start to pay attention to how you're feeling, especially for me. I think I try to pay attention to patterns with myself. If it's a one-off, you don't necessarily need to put so much energy into that, which I tend to overanalyze like every feeling that I have. So even the one-offs, I'm like, what's wrong with me? Am I dying? I'm like,
Carlos is like, you run this like diagnostic on yourself, like,
yeah, that's exactly it. Yeah. Like, why was I more out of breath today than yesterday? Why, like, am I having heart failure? Do I need to go see a doctor?
Oh my God. I will tell you, I think it took until I really healed a lot, like 15 years after having a cancer, like every muscle, I had bone cancer. I know it. I knew it. It's like, I mean, I can laugh about it now, but at the time it really is terrifying.
Well, that's also called being like a hypochondriac Jew, though.
Is that in a diagnostic?
Most
doctor writes a prescription pad.
most Jews I know. This is what we deal with. It's in the genes.
You're a hypochondriac Jew. What's your prescription? What's the prescription for that?
No, I've even said that to doctors before. They're like, I'm like, well, to be honest with you, I'm a Jew. I'm a little hypochondriac. I'm a little neurotic. So, I'm probably nothing's wrong with me, but I'm here because I need you to give me all the tests so that I can walk away feeling totally fine. I'll come back next year for the same thing. Like, I already know that this is just anxiety, but let's go for it anyways. I need to have the piece of paper in hand. Crazy. But no, I mean, I pay attention to patterns with myself. So for example, brain fog is something for me that is a pattern that I fall into. So, and it will typically be in the morning when I get up and go to work. I will have this hour, 2 hours in the beginning of the day where I have brain fog. And what I've learned is that it's connected to my job, and that I'm just not feeling charged up and energized, and I need some time off. And it's so energy sapping for me being in the studios or being with the clients or whatever it is, that I start to actually disappear. I start to go on a vacation. My brain starts to go on a vacation before I let my body go on the vacation.
I love that metaphor. I mean, it's how you're framing it, right? It's not really going on vacation. It's like brain fog, but your body's signaling like, Juliet, slow down here.
Yeah. I mean, your brain's not working on all cylinders. And really, I mean, for me, I'll share this as just something that I've dealt with from a post-traumatic stress symptom from having a lot of trauma in my life. Is I have something called disassociation. And it happens when I get to a really high stress point, and it doesn't happen, sometimes so regularly that I would know, exactly the moment that it's going to occur. But I've started, especially since I've been dealing with the symptoms since I was about 16 years old. It was right before my dad died, that I can kind of tell when it's going to happen. I start to have the brain fog, and then I'll go into a full-blown episode, which basically means that for almost a week straight, I don't even actually feel like I'm really here. I'm in a dream state. It's a really scary, scary place to be. And it's called disassociation. And what really is happening is it's almost as if your brain has the flu. And so for a week or two, my brain has to rest, and I have to rest and meditate and make sure that I'm not overdoing it physically, mentally. And there's a possibility, though, that I could have never gotten to that point if I don't always go so hard and so crazy. So I've actually had a long time now where I haven't had it, because I can kind of see when it's coming.
Yeah, well, and I love what you're sharing is like, what it looks like in your body. And I think that's really important, because it's going to come up different for everyone. I know a couple of years ago, I was starting to experience, a burnout. And I had it once, like when I was in grad school, actually right before I got married in 2011. And I worked with Dr. Raquel, and she was like, you need to take a semester off grad school. I had hypothyroid. Actually, that was like my symptom. And I was able to reverse it at the time by just slowing down. And it was easy like that. Time I was able to compartmentalize. I was like, oh, okay, well, I'm getting married and I want to enjoy this time. So it was easy to kind of slow down of like going to grad school and pulling back a little bit, because it felt like this once in a lifetime type of period of my life. But a couple of years ago, I was waking up like not just feeling like I wasn't even rested. And I've always got prioritized sleep. Like I've never been someone who can skip sleep. And I was waking up just tired again. And I remember I would get on my phone in the morning and just like scroll on my email, on Facebook. I'm like, why am I doing this? Like, this is just making me more tired. And and then I was like craving coffee. Whenever I'm craving coffee, I have to stay off of it because it just makes me too anxious. But when I know that I'm like waking up without feeling energized, or like I'm doing things, when I'm doing things that are further depleting me, that's how instead of being like, why am I doing this? And trying to do hacks not to be on social media. I'm like, okay, I'm like burnout. I'm in some experience of depletion and I need to pull back. But that's, for me, I don't necessarily get brain fog. I have something different. And so I think it's
interesting that you bring up the whole thing about like working and going to school. And, recently I know somebody who, I'm in social circles with, and she was getting her master's degree, and she was, running a business. And then she was also teaching a ton of fitness classes on the side. And then she started to have these fainting episodes, and went to see a bunch of doctors. There's nothing wrong with her heart, thankfully, but it turns out that she has Graves' disease, which is autoimmune disease. And
it's hyperthyroid. It's the opposite.
Yes, hyperthyroid. But, these symptoms came out of nowhere. It doesn't run in her family. And, the first thing I thought to myself is just like, you're running yourself into the ground, running a business, getting a master's, teaching a ton of classes. You're never slowing down. You're never getting recharged. And, even though our bodies are machines, any machine machines can break down. Your computer gets overloaded, right? And then a virus happens, and then you need to go put it on sleep mode, rest it, and so you have to think about your body in that way too. I think sometimes we try to outrun ourselves.
Yeah, when I would even argue, challenge the metaphor that our bodies are technically machines, but they're much more like artificial. And if we're going to use the machine metaphor, they would probably have to be artificial intelligence, and that they respond to things other than the direct inputs we're trying to control, right? Because like you have a history of trauma, that trauma lives in your body. So even if you don't want to be thinking that, right? Like a situation triggers it, or, or different stages of life. Like we all have hormonal issues or whatever, based on wherever we are. Our bodies are also giving us like feedback that we may or may not want to deal with.
And I think a really, really important thing is when your body is giving you feedback, to have a level of acceptance around it.
Yes. Can we talk about that? Because I think that's the biggest.
Yeah.
Because I've learned in burnout that time is one of your biggest healing tools, of like just giving yourself time.
But I don't have time, Allie. This is how people operate. Like, I don't have time to slow down. I need to make money. My kids need to get from place to place. I have all these responsibilities. What time do I have?
Yeah. Well, I love that you say that, because that's why I created the quiz. What's my comfort eating style? It's also these patterns that we put on ourselves that are creating a lack of time. And I also want to put an asterisk here, because there are some people, based on your level of privilege, who really don't have time. They're working 3 jobs. They have to take public transportation. They've got kids. I mean, there are some people who really do not have time. And
100%.
Then there's those of us who do have the time. We're just choosing not to take it. And so one of the things that I realized for myself, and you were talking about how hard running a business is. I used to tell myself that all the time. And I was in grad school and I was running a business, and I've had a tremendous emotional support. Okay. But I have had no financial support in my business. And so I've had some privilege, and I also haven't had some privilege. And I was telling myself, I have to make money. I have student loans that need paid, like I have a mortgage, all this stuff. But one of the things that really shifted my own mindset, and I hope this will help other people, is I read a study 2 years ago. And this was actually when I oddly gave myself permission to slow down. I read this study out of Dartmouth University, and they studied entrepreneurship. And they said that everyone has this idea that entrepreneurs are huge risk takers, and some of them are. But 80% of entrepreneurs get family money, friends and family money. So they're not quite taking the risks they thought that we all think they are. And they have a really big safety net there, right? And when I read that, I was like, I went from feeling like, why am I so behind? Why is this taking so long? Why am I working so hard? To being like, holy shit. And it gave me so much compassion for myself. It wasn't to demonize that other people get money and financial and family friend support. That's great. If I had it, I'd take it. But it went from me being like, I have no time, and I have to, like, I was basically competing and comparing myself to these standards that basically were unrealistic, because I didn't come from the same resources. And so it gave me a tremendous amount of compassion for myself. And I went from feeling like, why is this taking me so long? Why am I so behind? To like, I'm awesome. I'm making this work without family money. And it was this huge lesson of like, when we compare ourselves or try to keep up with what the kids are doing, or what success track, not trap, but comparing ourselves to our friends and what notches we're in. Because that creates a lot of the busyness. And that was a huge, like, oh my God, I need to keep my eyes on my own paper and trust myself and my path. And that didn't happen overnight, but the amount of energy and the permission it gave me to slow down was monumental.
And it's funny you say it creates the busyness, because it might not even be the actual busyness in you doing something, but it's the busyness of your headspace and what you're telling yourself all day, every day, and the tape that's playing on replay, because that is really just like, emotional eaters and thinking about food all day long, and what am I going to eat, and how many calories is this? And, that takes up so much headspace and mental space that you're exhausted. That burnout right there.
Yeah, it was creating such energy. And it was also like talking about, like, I didn't know that you could mute people on social media, but all of a sudden
I'm going to mute a lot of people after this watch.
But I stopped, like, the people I was comparing myself to, it made me realize, like, oh my God, they're in a different business. They're in this like lifestyle business that's all about the prestige, like these prestige signals of wealth and beauty and all that stuff. And that's okay. We all have our different.
And they're not. I'm not general. Like I don't know all these people, but I have a feeling that they're in the same place that most of us are. They're not happy either. They just have more resources, a better camera, so better outfit, so.
Yeah, but it gave me
facade.
Yeah, but it helped me because I still want to be inspired by people, but it totally shifted who I started following and who I started admiring. Mm-hmm. And I started being like, wow, it doesn't mean that anyone who has money I didn't admire, but what I started to look at is like, wow, I want to start looking and admiring up to the people who have traveled the furthest, right? Like, where did you start and where have you ended up versus where am I in comparison to you? And it just totally shifted these metrics. And I started to learn a lot from really smart people, from really gritty people, from people who had similar values. And I'm still doing the same work, but I've slowed down and I've given myself permission to have my own path because I'm just doing something different, not better or worse. It's just different.
Yeah, I think accepting where you are is really important. And it's funny because that is exactly where I am with my business right now.
Yeah.
And, talk about comparison. It's really challenging having a business for going on 11 years, which I know, Allie, yours is around the same age as ours.
Yes.
And, to be where we are in 11 years, it's hard to not feel grateful. And just like Allie said, to think about what we've done with the little resources that we've had. If I actually think about it in that perspective, it's incredible what we've been able to accomplish. However, the comparison trap has really grappled us for a long time now, especially because our industry has exploded and a lot of brands that are similar to ours have outgrown us by exponentially in half the time, a quarter of the time. And so it's, for us, it's like, oh, we missed the boat, but they knew they had someone with a lot of money. We never had someone with a lot of money. We're in the process of trying to fundraise right now. And we just haven't had the access to those resources. But yeah, we're so, in a nutshell, where I am right now is right there where I am getting into reality and less fantasy. Fantasy is nice and all, but it can really hurt. Yeah, but it can also be it can really hurt you to never actually be in the moment, in reality of where you actually are.
Yeah. And I think, for people listening, especially around your health with weight loss, right? I mean, there's also health privilege, right? Like certain people have genetics that have, whether if you're comparing based on weight, faster metabolism, or some people didn't grow up exposed to air pollution and pesticides, or some people, they've had health struggles in their life. So for us to compare, like, I know some people have really struggled when they break a bone and they can't exercise, right? Then they're like, oh, I'm behind. I can't keep up my workouts. I can't and so we all our bodies are going to be these imperfect processes, right? And it's like, you get sick when you don't want to get sick, right? You get the flu when you don't want to get the flu, whatever it is, and learning to deal with that so that you don't set yourself further back and further into burnout, I really think is the challenge. It's when things are going well, it's easier to be like, oh, I feel good about myself and all that stuff. But having the compassion and really trying to learn and have mindset shifts, I think, around the stress that we're creating, because a lot of it is self-created. Not all of it. I don't want to deny it. There's real, to your point, and some people really do have more access to capital and access to a network, right? Because if you have access to capital, you also have access to a really powerful network. And by power, I mean, financial and people, everyone knows people and stuff. But when it comes to health, or burnout, whether you're exhausted or comparing yourself, or even if you found a partner or not, or whatever, it's like no one is right or wrong. No one's ahead or behind. And that's one of the big comfort eating patterns, is the competitor, right? It's like, am I ahead or am I behind? Am I winning or losing? And we do that when we're not clear of our own values and we're not able to discern what's really important to us.
Now, what was your comfort eating pattern?
Oh, well, so what I realized is, because I don't really comfort eat anymore, and I'm really comfortable with my body, but I was competing in my business. that's what I was doing. So like, I don't eat it. For what I realized is that instead of comfort eating or like worrying about weight, I was doing the same metrics, except with like social media following this. And I discovered this several years ago. So I'm through it, but it took a while to work through it. But I realized that, and this kind of came back to, I didn't realize at the time, but I put my own methodology on me. I worked my own process. And, you know, I was bullied when I was in 5th grade, like really badly. So I realized I was in this unconscious way feeling behind because I wasn't popular. Right. So the metrics I was focusing on were popularity, not anything that actually matters to me. Like popularity actually doesn't matter to me. Like I actually like being outside the box. I like being fringe. And so I couldn't figure out why this was affecting me, right? I was like, anytime we're doing things that make no sense, there's always an emotional story or reason behind it. And so what I started to do was like, wait, is it really important to me that what my list size is? You know, I think it was Tara Gentile, she calls your list size like it's like your internet penis size. You know?
That's awesome.
Like, how big of a following do you have? But part of why I cared about that is because the people that I was learning from were saying like, that's the most important thing, right? So you get in this echo chamber, kind of like when we follow people who are like, it's about calories. It's about how long you're doing your workout. Like we tend to, in the beginning, until we get stuck enough, we follow the people that are confirming the view we have and confirming these negative or these unhelpful patterns that we have, right? So I was finding people who were telling me that popularity did matter, right? And then I was like, wait a second. It took some learning, peeking behind the curtain and seeing that a lot of people who have huge social media followings actually don't have a business. And so I was like, oh my God, that was like mind blowing to me, right? And I was like,
and I'm also thinking, you know, you could have 100,000 followers, of which how many are actually paying attention to you or engaging with you? You could have 100 followers, of which all of them message you or engage with you in your community, really like want to hear what you have to say. So yeah, it's interesting.
Right. But if you don't know what works or what matters to you, you're just going to be looking at conventional metrics, right? It's like the scale. If people don't understand how to balance their blood sugar or what stories are tripping them up or how to heal their gut, they're just going to be measuring calories, right? Because you think that's because that's what everyone tells you. And we all start, when we have no context, we start with what's quote unquote normal, or and I want to put in parentheses conventional wisdom, because it's not usually very wise, right?
And I would say to your listeners, if you haven't taken that quiz on Allie's website, definitely do it, because, you know, even though it's what's your comfort eating style, how you eat is a lot of how you approach a lot of things in your life. So, you know, myself, you know, just like Allie, I've worked a lot on my relationship with food and my body, where I don't have really a comfort eating style anymore. I had dill pickle popcorn for lunch today, and I don't care.
Carlos hates pickles. Whenever they bring like, he'll order a burger and like there will be a pickle on the plate, and they like deliver it. He's like, take that off! Like I have to put it on my plate like a 5-year-old.
I had dill pickle popcorn and a half sour pickle, actual pickle with it. So clearly I'm pregnant. Just kidding, guys. I'm not pregnant at all, but
you're pregnant with possibility.
There you go. Yeah. I'm birthing some businesses, guys. I'm birthing the business. So lots of pickles for me. But, you know, when I took your quiz, it was just so perfect, because even though this isn't how I eat, this is definitely how I am in life. And even going back to me saying the brain fog and, you know, and my disassociative episodes that have happened when I've hit a real tipping point, my style is the avoider. And so when I have brain fog, what am I doing? I'm escaping, I'm avoiding, I'm not even I'm not there anymore. I go away. And so this is how I am when things become too overwhelming, or I don't want to face like I said, I'm right now in my business, I'm trying to stay in the reality and not the fantasy, because the fantasy is, again, a way of avoiding something, the actual where we are. And when I'm avoiding things, I'm not necessarily really wanting to look at, you know, our profitability, right? That I'm like, I have to look at the, you know, Q1 statement. And I'm like, I had Mackie look at it. I'm like, you tell it to me. He's like, what, you can't look at the piece of paper? I'm like, that's, you know, I'm like, I was trying to avoid it. So, you know, that is just how I approach a lot of things in my life. But when you know that about yourself, you can start to face it. when you really peel back the curtain, you're like, okay, I see what I'm doing here.
Yeah. And the metaphor that just popped into my mind, do you remember, like, I don't know if you've ever gone bowling, but like they have the bumper lanes where like when you're learning to bowl, like you can put the bumpers in the, and like, again, for me to get out of this competing pattern, it took like, I had to reach out to a couple of business owners who are also coaches that I admire. Right. And we actually all started meeting once a month. We call them our sanity sessions, but it keeps us grounded in reality, right? Because it's so easy when you're on a learning curve or you're unsure to look to other people. Right. And that makes sense, but it's easy to then try to follow their path because it looks successful, but you don't really know what's behind the curtain for anybody wherever they are. And so that was super helpful. Like the same way that you reached out to Mackie, I had to find people who were in the same reality that I was, right? Like they had to be self-funded and they were also doing really research-based work in coaching, which is not the norm. So I had to find people who, aligned and were similar and have support from them. And then for me, I had to learn like a marketing sales style that was really in alignment with me, which is more education based, which is what this podcast is about. Because a lot of people in our industry play on fear and they manipulate, they use scarcity mindset, which scarcity mindset is huge for people who have struggled with eating, right? Because it's like the same way you think you can never get enough of your favorite food, that mindset is the same mindset you bring to other things, right? And a lot of marketing does prey on other people. And I didn't want to do that. And so it's tricky territory. It's not just like...
And it's so easy that you could have done that because, well, I see it works for all these people. I want to make money. I want to have a successful business. But at the end of the day, if you're not living out your passion and actually feeling like good and having what I love to use the word integrity. If you don't have integrity with yourself and what you're doing, then it just feels wrong. And then you're not experiencing contentment or happiness, which I don't even like those words because I think they're very loaded words because what is happiness? What is contentment? But I'm going to use them in this, to describe what you're just saying is like, if you're doing something because it's the status quo or it's what everybody else is doing, but it doesn't feel like it's right for you, you're not going to be getting out of your current state of, you're not going to grow. It's just, yeah, you might grow your list. Yeah, you might make some extra money, but you're not going to actually feel better.
Right. And you're not going to learn. I mean, this is something really important. When you were hosting, we had an episode on growth mindset with Carol Dweck, and growth mindset has really taken off in certain industries. And Carol Dweck had to write another piece because she said, people are taking growth mindset a little bit out of context, and that it is about learning and you have to learn as you go. Success isn't instant, but however, you have to learn the right things, right? and that's what she was saying in the sense that one of the things that seems so silly, but and again, I want to step back and saying, I also had to learn, similar to you saying so grateful. I had to be so grateful because I have the best clients. I am they get amazing results. Like everything that actually matters to me was happening. I was just burning myself out in the comparison. But as I started to learn to okay, now I want to grow. Now I know I have something really that I want to share with everyone. Similar, I mean, our businesses are in similar stages, right? Ready for growth.
And you have to ask yourself, well, why do I want to grow?
Yes. And in what way?
Do I want to grow because everybody else is growing and that, it'll make me look better and that's what I should be doing? Or, you know what I mean? So yeah, in what way do I actually want to grow? Because when I think about it, I want to grow as a person. I want to learn more. I want to experience more. I want to reach and touch more people and make more impact. And that's not necessarily meaning that I need to have 100 Unite studios. And that's been really important for me to start to wrap my head around.
Yeah, me too. Some of these business models, people are managing tons of people. I'm I don't want to manage tons of people. That's just not why I.
Yeah, and you need to know that about yourself. That's so important. And really ask yourself questions when you're not in comparison mode. Then you really can say well, what do I actually want to do day to day? What is going to make me happy? Well, if you don't want to manage a ton of people, then okay, that route isn't for you.
Right. It eliminates choices, which is nice because I think sometimes when people are feeling burnout, it's oh my God, it's like I can never do enough. Am I choosing right? Like there's so many choices. And it's like discernment. Like that's always what I'm working on with my clients. It's like not only what foods work best for you, but what emotional choices work best for you. And in relation to burnout, like I think a really good question is like, what replenishes me? What replenishes me? And, I realized with working out, when I do like a really hardcore workout for an hour, I'm exhausted afterward. It's just not good for me. So interval training actually fires me up, right? So I do that, or yoga, or a long walk. But I think that metaphor for exercise is the same thing for emotional choices. Like you shouldn't get done with a workout and feel like, oh my God, that was amazing because I'm exhausted. Like
I need to go take a nap right now.
Right? You shouldn't get through social media and be like, that was amazing because now I feel like shit. Like
Yeah. And also I've been really thinking about this a lot because this pertains to me. Is like, I'm always like, oh, when is my vacation? When is my vacation? When can I take time off? And that is also a sign of burnout, is when you can't wait to escape and take your vacation. And I fall into that trap a lot too. It's like I'm working so hard and the reward is I'm going to book 3 nights away at blah, 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 But that's no way to live your life, is living your life for the weekend or living your life for the vacation.
Yeah. And that's a great point, because before we got on, we were kind of talking about mindset, and I realized like part of me did have to slow down, and I realized like I love the business I have. I love what it's growing into, but I was starting to not enjoy it because of the time pressures I was putting on myself. Right. And so that was, and for the most part, I create the timelines, but that competitor mindset, right? The finish line's always moving, and there's a big timing that you have to trust your own timing. But for people on the call, like think about your timelines. Like, are those creating stress in and of itself? So it's like, if you have 3 things to do on your to-do list, you can approach those a little bit more spaciously, a little bit more exciting, versus if you have 10, it's like, oh my God, how am I going to get through this? And you don't have time to enjoy any of that stuff, right? And so this is,
and I think there's something that people get off on like how much can I do in a really short amount of time. The multitasking, in our culture is honestly out of control. Don't you think?
Yeah, well, of course. But again, to what end? Like, what are you working towards? I think when I was in this kind of competitor mode with my business, I was like, what am I like? I had to take a step back. Like, what am I even competing towards? But I couldn't see the pattern at the time. So I was telling myself all of these things like, oh my God, you have to make money. And all those things were true. And though the comparing wasn't helping. So it's like nothing changed, but to kind of circle back about being able to learn effectively about ourselves, in our patterns and everything. And also in the areas of our life that we want to improve. Like I learned that like I get barely any traffic to my website, right? Because I don't pay for ads. I don't do any of the stuff. So it's like, okay, instead of comparing myself to other people, why don't I start seeing it like what I can work on for myself? And it was like, okay, I just need to learn to increase traffic to my website. That's something I can do that isn't dependent on whether I'm better or ahead of someone else. You know what I mean? So that I wanted to just circle back. So for people, it's like, what if you're feeling burnout in your career and your health or whatever, like, let's keep your eyes on your own paper and say like, what about my situation can I figure out for myself and go on that path? Because I don't think any of us want anyone else's lives, right? Like even part of why people watch really bad TV is to feel better about themselves, right?
The grass isn't greener.
But don't you I know you have shared that you like really bad, like reality TV. Isn't part of it that it makes you feel better about your own life? Like,
I wouldn't say that that's it for me. Maybe on an unconscious level. On the most conscious level, from what I can think, is why I watch it is because it's me avoiding my reality.
Oh, okay.
It's just it's a numbing tool.
Okay. But some people watch this stuff and they judge the other people. And look,
at least I'm not 16 and pregnant. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. But the flip side of that is we're still comparing, right? So it's like
the flip side is like, oh, look at these fucking people 16 and pregnant and they're getting money off this television show and they're getting all these sponsors and they have 100,000 Instagram followers, Yeah. So
they're geniuses.
I swear, I'm a really positive person, guys. But before Ali and I got on the call, I said the biggest thing that I'm learning about burnout is it's a state of mind. And the reason why I don't feel so as burnt out as I have in the past, with even having less on my plate. To be honest, I feel like I have more on my plate now than ever. And it's actually energizing me, is because my frame of mind is really good right now. Like I'm feeling really empowered, as far as, okay, this is where my business is. Trying not to compare it anymore. This is where my life is. Having more gratitude, being, just being in the moment of saying, look how much I have. A beautiful husband, a beautiful apartment, friends, connections, my health, and so these are things that I'm focusing on now more. And the more I'm focusing on that, the better I'm feeling, the more energy I have to actually even do more.
Yeah, well, and I'm glad you shared that, because when we are comparing or competing or avoiding or one of the other styles, remember to take the quiz, it actually over time creates a self-fulfilling prophecy because it burns us out, versus reversing that spiral, which is you're saying. And I'm so glad that you said that. And the big shift here that Juliet's describing for listeners is that she now feels like she's making choices versus life just happening to her. And the same thing happened to me. Rather than feeling like, why can't I figure this out? What am I doing wrong? It's like, oh, now I have choices. Like when I actually face this, I have different choices. And that just gives you energy to know that you have choices. Wouldn't you say that, Juliet?
Yeah. And I think also I hate even using these words. Lean in. I'm leaning in.
But you're defining it in a different way.
I know. That's like my cynical, like New York person coming out. Like, I don't want to, use the same woo terms everybody else uses. I'm on a journey, leaning in. But no, the best way to describe it is like, I really am leaning into the possibility that there are multiple choices and paths that you can take, millions that you could take. You know what I mean? Your life is in your hands. Nothing is really happening to you. For the most part. Yes, there are extenuating circumstances that do happen. And, that's the resiliency that you create and work around when things happen. You take them and you roll with them. But in business, in friendships, in what ice cream I'm going to eat that day, I have the choice. And whatever I end up choosing, you just have to lean into it and go with it. And having too many choices is hard. I know we live in a world where there's so many choices and it's completely overwhelming. But I've sort of resigned myself to this idea that whatever I choose, I'll just go with it, and we'll figure it out as we get there. Whether I choose
course correct.
Yeah, you can course correct, because nobody knows what we're supposed to be doing on this planet, why we're here. It's all a mystery. It's all an experiment. And I mean, if you just accept that, then you can have a little bit more carefree attitude, towards what happens in life.
Yeah. And also what you're describing, Juliet, is that it's kind of like you have to root to rise. Like you kind of need that grounding and safety so that you can roll with things, and finding out what you value and your own discernment of what's important to you can give you that compass so that you're heading in the right direction, because you're going to find no choices are right or wrong. It's just like, am I overall heading in the right direction?
I think there's something to be said for really getting to know yourself. You're in a relationship with yourself your whole life, and it's a growing relationship. Just like I learn more about my husband every, year we're together. I learn more about him, and, we're growing together as a unit. I learn more about myself too as I age, but there's some things that I know about the core of myself and what helps me to stay grounded and thrive, so that even among all these choices, there's definitely maybe we call it the soul part of myself that stays grounded and understands myself a little bit, and what I need to just stay grounded, which is regular exercise, routine. When the house is in disarray, my brain feels in disarray, so I need to make sure certain things are organized. Those things you can have control over, and they can help you so that the external stuff, whatever you choose, doesn't have to be as scary, because you know yourself and you have some base, like a base to go off of,
I love that you brought that up, because, in the work that I do with clients, ultimately what they start to uncover is that fighting food in our bodies is about not feeling like we belong. I know that seems like a very big stretch. So there's like a lot to discover to figure that out. But and we're actually doing this in Truths with Food this week. I talk about you can't belong or connect with other people or with what you want most in life if you don't first belong to yourself, right? You have to first, because that's why people feel alone around other people, or you can feel really fine being quote unquote alone by yourself. But you have to first understand what is important to you and what grounds you and all that stuff. And I think in wrapping up, we can almost say burnout is an invitation to know yourself more deeply. And we often learn by what doesn't work. So it's like having compassion and realize, okay, I figured out that doesn't work. and I think those difficult times really sift and help get your values more clear, right? It's like, okay, I was trying that. I was trying to, even though I didn't realize I was trying to be popular, I was, and that's actually doesn't do it for me. And I'm so glad I know that now because I can unhook from a lot of things. So burnout can be really an invitation to knowing yourself on a deeper level and feeling that choice and the freedom that comes from choice, rather than thinking you're missing out when you choose something differently.
Nobody is impervious to pain and suffering.
No,
I know.
I'm hanging up.
Nobody is. We're all human. We're all experiencing life in that way. Loss, love, all of it. And so just bringing a level of acceptance to that things are going to come your way that might be painful or they might be wonderful. And just, if you just know that now, and you're not trying to escape that, avoid that, you know what I mean? Compete with, to go around that. And then I feel like you can, not to say avoid burnout, but know how to deal with it when it comes up.
Yeah. Yeah. Or to your point, like we both still have so much going on, but it just feels so differently.
Exactly. The attitude is different.
Yeah. Well, because also now that we've changed the pattern, we're getting replenished as we go rather than burn out as we go. Right? I mean, life is a lot of work, no matter who you are. And so it's like, as long as we get a return on investment from our choices, it doesn't mean that we can't work hard. It just means that we're working, to use a financial metaphor, we're getting a return on our investment in terms of meaning and like, this matters to me,
Yes.
Thank you so much for coming back, Juliet. I think I've discerned that I want to have, will you come back a couple more times?
Oh, 100%. I missed this.
A good me too.
I brought out my good old microphone. It had some dust on it. I was very excited to come on the show today.
Good. Well, we're going to have you back. So everyone, welcome Juliet back. I mean, we'll have her as special guest, but I hope you got some things today. Some key takeaways are, knowing yourself and what is really important to you. What will replenish me? That's a great question to start thinking about. And I hope we gave you some insights about comparing, avoiding, and et cetera. And again, you can take the quiz to know your type, and then you can learn all of the different types as well. And there's a secret Insatiable episode that you get as a gift for taking the quiz. So you can take that at alishapiro.com. And if you can remember to leave a review, I always forget to ask, but that'll help people find the show. Until next time, thanks again, Juliet, for joining us.
Thanks, Allie.
Thank you, Health Rebels, for tuning in today. Have a reaction, question, or want the transcript from today's episode? Find me at alishapiro.com. I'd love if you leave a review on Apple Podcast and tell your friends and family about Insatiable. It helps us grow our community and share a new way of approaching health in our bodies. Thanks for engaging in a different kind of conversation. And remember, always, your body truths are unique, profound, real, and liberating.